Dwemer Lore, Part 3. Ancient Scrolls of the Dwemer, 8. The Snow Elf and the Variation Lens, by Marabar Sul. Kond, the tonal architect, had spent 20 years attuning his great animus geode he'd found in the inner Druthant, trying to synchronize it with the precession of the dual equinoxes, in order to captivate the nymphinth essence. The geode's vibratory affinities continued to elude him, however, so one day he threw down his attuenures and left his workshop and went to the kitchens for an infusion of chai. As he approached the kitchen portal, he heard sibilant music that cut off abruptly as he stepped over the threshold. His house assistant, a snow elf maiden named Lyriel, withdrew her hands from behind the steam grill and looked up guiltily. "I heard music, Lyriel," Scholl said. "What did you just put behind the counterfactor?" "It is nothing, Sir Dwarf," the maiden replied. "Just something I cobbled together to pass the time." "What? Have you been in my device closet again? Show me what you have there." Reluctantly, the snow elf reached behind the steam grill and drew out a fist-sized object of golden metal, crystal knobs glinting on its flange hood. Mushkeld held out his hand, and Lyriel carefully placed the object in it. "Don't drop it," she said. "It'll get detuned." Well, the engineer said, "So you built yourself a crude tonal variation lens. Is this what was playing the music I heard?" "Yes, Sir Dwarf," the maiden said, gazing at the floor. I hope I didn't do anything wrong." "What, with this device? There's nothing dangerous in a melodic repeater bauble, as long as it doesn't leak linthal waves from its volumizer. Can't have that. Might interfere with the static condensers." Oh, don't worry. I used archaeoid shielding. Not very much," she said anxiously. "But it's not a melodic repeater, sir. It harmonizes with my mental melodies." "Nonsense," he scoffed. "No one knows how to synchronize a variation lens with mental concept cycles. It's never been done." "I wouldn't know anything about that, Sir Dwarf," Lyriel said, wringing her hands nervously. "I just flipped the drum emitter so it cancelled the demi-eketar waves, and it worked just fine. Can I have it back now?" "Hold on, Dasm," the engineer said, raising a hand while he looked more closely at the gleaming device. "Flipping the dun emitter cancels the demi-eketars. Yes, I can see how that might work. This may be just the thing I need to attune my animus geo to the nth piece essence." As Munkhold turned in excitement to take the variation lens back to his workshop, the elf maiden picked up a flipper strut with both hands and struck him across the back of the head. The tonal architect fell dead to the ground as Lyriel picked up her shiny device. "Never liked him," she hissed to herself. "Always smelled like Dwemer oil." Then she opened the brazen louvers of a vent tube, crawled in, and began lowering herself down through the inwards of the dwarven city. "Guess I'm going down to join the Undermen, and not coming back." And with that, she turned on her variation lens, which immediately began harmonizing with her mental melodies. Ancient Scrolls of the Dwemer, 10. The Dowry, by Marabar Sul. Gingli was the wealthiest landowner in Gunnul, and over the years he had saved a tremendous dowry for the man who would marry his daughter, Yennefer. When she reached the age of consent, he locked the gold away for safekeeping and announced his intention to have her marry. She was a comely lass, a scholar, a great athlete, but dour and brooding in aspect. This personality defect did not bother her potential suitors any more than her positive traits impressed them. Every man knew the tremendous wealth that would be his as the husband of Yennefer and son-in-law of Ynil. That alone was enough for hundreds to come to Gunnul to pay court. "The man who will marry my daughter," said Ynil to the assembled, "must not be doing so purely out of avarice. He must demonstrate his own wealth to my satisfaction. This simple pronouncement removed the vast majority of the suitors, since they knew they could not impress the landowner with their meager fortunes. A few dozen did come forward within a few days, clad in fine Kilar cloth of spun silver, accompanied by exotic servants, traveling in magnificent carriages. All who came to meet with Yin Li's approval, but none arrived in a more resplendent fashion than Waylon Nerlich. The young man, of whom no one had ever heard, arrived with a shining ebon coach, drawn by a team of dragons. His clothing was the rarest manufacture. It was accompanied by an army of the most fantastical servants any Gunnar had ever seen. His valets had eyes on the sides of their heads, and his maidservants seemed cast in gemstone. As such was not enough for Yin Li. The man who marries my daughter must prove himself an intelligent fellow, for I would not have an ignoramus as a son-in-law and a business partner, he declared. This eliminated a large portion of the wealthy suitors. Through their lives of luxury, they had never needed to think for themselves very much, if at all. Still, some came forward over the next few days, demonstrating their wit and learning, quoting the great sages of the past and offering the philosophies of metaphysics and alchemy. Waylon also came and asked for Yin Li to dine at the villa he had rented outside of Gunnar. There the landowner saw scores of scribes working on translation of Almeri tracts and enjoyed the young man's somewhat irreverent but intriguing intelligence. Nevertheless, though he was much impressed with Waylon, Yin Li had another challenge. "I love my daughter very much," said Yin Li, "and I hope that the man who marries her will make her happy as well. Should any of you make her smile, she and the great dowry are yours." The suitors lined up for days, singing her songs, proclaiming their devotion, describing her beauty in the most poetic of terms. Yennefer merely glared at all with hatred and melancholia. Yin Li stood by her side and began to despair. His daughter's suitors were failing to a man. Finally, Waylon came to the chamber. "I will make your daughter smile," he said. "I dare say I'll make her laugh, but only after you've agreed to marry us. If she is not delighted with me within 1 hour of our engagement, the wedding can be called off." Yin Li turned to his daughter. She was not smiling, but her eyes had sparkled with some morbid curiosity in this young man. As no other suitor had even registered that for her, he agreed. "The dowry is naturally not to be paid till after you're wed," said Yin Li. "Being engaged is not enough." "Might I see the dowry still?" asked Waylon. Knowing how fabled the treasure was, and understanding this would be likely the closest the young man would come to possessing it, Yin Li agreed. He had grown quite fond of Waylon. On his orders, Waylon, Yin Li, and Glum Genfra, and the Castellan delved deeply into the stronghold of Gunnar. The first vault had to be opened by touching a series of runic symbols. Should one of the marks be activated incorrectly, a volley of poisoned arrows would have struck the thief. Yin Li was particularly proud of the next level of security. A lock composed of the blades with 18 tumblers that required 3 keys to be turned simultaneously. The blades were designed to eviscerate any who merely picked one of the locks. Finally, they reached the storeroom, and it was entirely empty. "By Lorcan, we've been burgled," cried Yin Li. "But how? Who could have done this?" "A humble, if I may say so, rather talented burglar," said Waylon. "A man who has loved your daughter from afar for many years, but did not possess the glamour or the learning to impress. That is, until the gold from her dowry afforded me the opportunity." "You!" bellowed Yin Li, scarcely able to believe it. Then something even more unbelievable happened. Yennefer began to laugh. She had never even dreamed of meeting someone like this thief. She threw herself into his arms before her father's outraged eyes. After a moment, Yin Li began to laugh as well. Yennefer and Waylon were married in a month's time. Though he was in fact quite poor and had little scholarship, Yin Li was amazed at how much his wealth increased with such a son-in-law and business partner. He made certain never to ask whence the excess gold came. Ancient Scrolls of the Dwemer, 11. Azure and the Box by Marabah Sul. Mixtbar had enjoyed an adventurous youth, but had grown to be a very wise, very old Dwemer who spent his life searching for truth and dispelling superstition. He'd invented much and created many theorems and logic structures that bore his name, but much of the world still puzzled him, and nothing was greater enigma to him than the nature of the Aedra and the Daedra. Over the course of his research, he came to the conclusion that many of the gods were entirely fabricated by man and Mer. Nothing, however, was a greater question for Nixbar than the limits of divine power. Were the greater beings the masters of the entire world, or did the humbler creatures have strength to forge their own destinies? As Nixbar found himself nearing the end of his life, he felt he must understand this last basic truth. Among the sage's acquaintances was a holy Chima priest named Antheric. When the priest was visiting Balthal-Glazertuman, Nixbar told him what he intended to do to find the nature of divine power. Antheric was terrified and pleaded with his friend not to break this great mystery, but Nixbar was resolute. Finally, the priest agreed to assist out of love for his friend, though he feared the results of this blasphemy. Antheric summoned Azura. After the usual rituals by which the priest declared his faith in her powers, and Azura agreed to do him no harm, Nixbar and a dozen of his students entered the summoning chamber, carrying with them a large box. "As we see you in our land, Azura, you are the goddess of dusk and dawn and all the mysteries therein," said Nixbar, trying to appear as kindly and as ubiquitous as he could be. "It is said that your knowledge is absolute." "So it is," smiled the Daedra. "You would know, for example, what is in this wooden box," said Nixbar. Azura turned to Athrithmic, her brow furrowed. The priest was quick to explain. "Goddess, this Dwemer is a very wise and respected man. Believe me, please, the intention is not to mock you, your greatness, but to demonstrate it to this scientist and to the rest of his skeptical race. I have tried to explain your power to him, but his philosophy is such that he must see it demonstrated. If I am to demonstrate my might in a way to bring the Dwemer race to understanding, it might have been a more impressive feat you would have me do," growled Azura, who turned to look at Nixbar in the eyes. "There is a red-petaled flower in the box." Nixbar did not smile or frown. He simply opened it and revealed to all that it was empty. When the students turned to look at Azura, she was gone. Only Antherix had seen the goddess's expression before she vanished, and he could not speak, for he was trembling so. A curse had fallen, he knew that truly, but even crueler was the knowledge of divine power that had been demonstrated. Nixbar also looked pale, uncertain on his feet, but his face shone not with fear but bliss, the smile of a Dwemer finding evidence for a truth only suspected. 2 of his students supported him, and 2 more supported the priest as they left the chamber. I have studied much over the years, performed countless experiments, taught myself 1,000 languages, and yet the skill that has taught me the final truth is one that I learned when I was but a poor young man struggling to earn enough gold so I could eat, whispered the sage. As he was escorted up the stairs to his bed, a red flower petal fell from the sleeve of his voluminous robe. Nixbar died that night, a portrait of peace that comes from contented knowledge. Antecedents of Dwemer Law. This book is an historical account of the development of the Dwemer Law and custom from its root in High Elven culture. In short, so far as I am able to trace the order of development in the customs of Bosmeri tribes, I believe it to have been in all ways comparable to the growth of Altmeri law. The earlier liability of slaves and animals was mainly confined to surrender. As in the Somerset Isles, this later became compensation. And what does this matter for the study of our laws today? As far as concerns the influence of Dwemer Lore upon our own, especially the Dwemer Lore of Master and Servant, the evidence of this is to be found in every judgment which has been recorded for the last 500 years. It has been stated already that we still repeat the reasoning that Dwemer magistrates, empty as it is to the present day. I will quickly show how Dwemer custom can be followed to the courts of the Dwemer. In the Lords of Cadmar Watch, PD 1180, it is said, if one who is owned by another slays one who owns himself, the first owner must pay the associates of the slain 3 fine instruments and the body of the one who is owned. There are many other similar citations. The same principle is extended even to the case of a centurion by which a man is killed. If at the common workbench one is slain by an animalculi, the associates of the slain may disassemble the animalculi and take its parts within 30 days. Consider what Darek has mentioned concerning the rude beasts of the Tenma forests. If a marsh cat was killed by an Argonian, his family were in disgrace till he had retaliated by killing the Argonian or another like it. Furthermore, if a marsh cat was killed by a fall from a tree, its relatives would take their revenge by toppling the tree, shattering its branches, and casting them to every part of the forest. I hope you've been enjoying these lore readings, and if you have, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.